Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Scott Silverman, co-founder of Commerce Next. We are a community event series and conference for marketers at retail and DTC brands. On behalf of my co-founders, Veronica Sonsev and Alan Dick, I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Spinning Up a Personalization Flywheel. Personalization is not a new topic, but it continues to rank as one of the top initiatives for retailers. And we had record attendance for this webinar. So clearly there's a lot of interest in this. And for the next hour, we'll be hearing what's new, learning how different brands are making progress and with personalization, which ultimately leads to bringing more joy to customers. So as always, we'll be taking questions. Feel free to load those up during the presentation. I'll explain a little bit more about how to do that. But thank you all for tuning in, making the time to join us live or listen in on the replay. So a couple important thank yous. First and foremost, I want to thank today's speakers. We really appreciate them making some time to be with us and to share their insights and experience. Today we have Samir Desai. He's EVP, Chief Digital and Technology Officer at Abercrombie and Fitch. Brian Hashemi, who's CMO at UncommonGoods. Elise Burak, who's Head of Consumer Marketing at Capsule. And Amanda Elam, who is CMO at Bloomreach. So we know how busy you are. We want to thank you for taking your time to share your insights with our community. So you will all be getting a nice gift from Gift Now, our official gifting partner. And if you're listening in, 5 of our lucky attendees will also be getting a gift, and it's just for the live listeners. And of course, I want to thank Bloomreach for sponsoring today's webinar. We could not bring these regular webinars to our audience and all of the insights that come with them without the support of our sponsors. It's been a pleasure working with the Bloomreach team, as it always is on this webinar, and I appreciate them supporting the topic that I think is really important to our community. I'm excited to get into today. So it was great seeing our community in Las Vegas last week, for those of you who were there in Shop Talk. So Commerce Next is coming up next on hopefully on your calendar. It's June 21st and 22nd in New York City. We have over 100 speakers, like some of the folks you see pictured here, like Charlie Cole, CEO of FTD, Ekta Chopra, Chief Digital Officer at Elf Beauty, Brian Seawald, SVP of E-commerce Express, and many more. We have a great agenda, topics that we'll be talking about setting up shop in the metaverse, scaling TikTok and influencers. We'll be going deep into a number of customer acquisition and retention topics through probably 50 plus sessions. And we've added a registration link in the chat, but you can also go to commercenext.com to learn more. A couple other things. Our next webinar is in 2 weeks. It's on Wednesday, April 20th, called Creating a Seamless E-commerce Experience Across the Customer Journey, featuring Liza Walsh. She's SVP of Marketing and Customer Experience at Boston Proper. Nick Kaplan, who's Chief Growth and Innovation Officer at Saudia Group, which includes New York & Company and Lord & Taylor and some others. And Ryan Bartley, who's Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of Fabric. And that's going to be moderated by my co-founder, Veronica Sonsev. And I always want to put a plug in for our podcast, Conversations with Commerce Next. Our newest episode features Sarah Rasmussen, who's EVP and Chief Customer Officer at Lands' End. Sarah talks about the importance of intellectual curiosity. She shares her practical, results-oriented perspectives and advice that she's honed from one of the world's top DTC retailers. It's a great story. You can find it on Commerce Next or wherever you enjoy getting your podcasts. And we have so much content on our YouTube channel. I strongly encourage you to go there. All of the past webinars, summit sessions, conversations with Commerce Next, they're all there. So take a moment to check out our YouTube channel and see some of the content that's there. So moving on to today's webinar. We're going to be up in a minute with Amanda Elam. She's going to give a presentation on spinning up personalization flywheel. Then we're going to do some audience polls, hear what you're all thinking. And then we have our panel discussion with Abercrombie and Fitch, Capsule, and UncommonGoods, and we'll take audience questions during that as well. So a couple housekeeping notes. First, don't worry if you've missed anything. We're recording the webinar. We'll make it available by tomorrow. And I want to show you where a couple things are on your screen so you can make the most of the webinar today. So if you look on your upper right, that's the main panel for all the interactivity, the chat, Q&A, polls, and handouts. Chat, that's where you can give our speaker high fives. You can interact with other audience members. Alan is always there asking you about where you're from and offering lots of fun trivia about that. If you have questions, use the Q&A. So just you'll see that right to the right of the chat, and you can enter your question down on the bottom. And if you see questions that you like, you can upvote them, and that helps us prioritize which ones our audience is most interested in hearing about. Also, continuing on that upper right is the handout section. Here, you'll be able to download Amanda's slides, and there's a great white paper that Bloomreach has put together on personalization. And we also included the latest Commerce Next research that we did, which is on 2022 priorities, where we collected information from over 118 retailers, and that's sponsored by ComX. So if you are listening on the replay, you'll see on the bottom right, that's where you can see things like the polling questions, the answers and the responses to the polling questions. So with that, all of that out of the way, I'd like to turn things over to Amanda Elam, CMO of Bloomreach. She's going to set the table on this topic of personalization. Amanda's going to share an overview of why personalization is so hard, if you didn't know already, and what a personalization flywheel can look like. So welcome to our virtual stage, Amanda. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Scott. And I'm sure everyone came to this presentation to see me do a bunch of PowerPoint slides. So I'll spend as little time as possible so that we can jump right into the Q&A with the experts. I'm Amanda Elam. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Bloomreach. And what does Bloomreach do? We essentially help you create revenue-driving commerce experiences by helping you engage, inspire, and convert your customers with personalization, which is obviously a big topic for us today. We do that with our marketing automation, our customer data, our search and merchandising, and our content solutions. So personalization has been a topic for a very long time, and it's something that I think we as marketers all continue to struggle with, particularly on the B2B side. Personalization can be even more difficult because we're not working with an individual consumer, but we're trying to talk to all of you guys and create a personalized experience that's meaningful to you. So this is certainly not something that is super easy, but it has become table stakes, because when we've moved from standing up the store, which is just getting a web and a mobile experience up and running that your consumers could engage with, to actually standing out from the crowd, to creating an experience that's so unique that your customers want to keep coming back. And the reason why that's so hard is because of the amount of data that you have and the different channels that you're engaging with. And you guys already know all of this. I'm preaching to the choir. Your customers have a whole bunch of data, their behavior, you're capturing their behavior at different points of their journey. But then you also have a bunch of product data and inventory data and return information and availability and all of these other things that make not just personalizing the experience for the individual, but also the products that they're going to buy super difficult. And the reality is that e-commerce personalization requires the collection of both of these sets of data. You have to have the combination of customer data and product data in order to build true personalization inside of that e-commerce experience. This happened to me specifically. So this is an example where I was shopping with Fossil, and Fossil, if you're on the phone, I apologize, but I was targeted with a smartwatch, and I'm an Android user. I know that's probably abnormal for marketing, but Fossil has a fantastic smartwatch that works with Android, and they are targeting me with ads. I converted on the purchase. You can see my order on the upper, I guess, right hand side of the screen. I paid $249 for this watch. I was super excited about it. 2 days later, I was retargeted with an ad for a cheaper price for that watch. And I was so frustrated because this watch that I loved and I was very excited about, now I feel like I could have paid $70 less had I just waited. And so this is not only is it a broken personalization, but it's also an experience that ended up having a negative impact on me as the consumer, Because what could have happened if the data was unified and I was removed from the segment at the moment of purchase, I could have been recommended some ancillary products to go with the watch that would have continued my pleasure with the Fossil brand and with the product that I purchased, and hopefully increase the sale of that product. So unified data, and this is what this is what Bloomreach talks about consistently, removes the friction from those personalized experiences. So I get that ad to engage with the watch. I come to the website, all of the content on the website, from the images to the videos to the blog content to the product recommendations, are related to the ad that converted me. And then once I convert, I even go into my search results. You can see in this example, all that I'm typing in this is Apple, but because I came and I was looking at a watch product, those are what are initially recommended to me in my search results. At the point of conversion where I'm re-engaged, I'm immediately moved into a different segment so that I get ads, hopefully, that continue to give me a happy purchase experience. So this is not unique to me, and I think this is something that you guys probably experience as consumers as well. That you're okay with the fact, or you understand that companies are collecting data on you, but the expectation is that that data is used to make your experience better. Where customers get frustrated is that hey, I'm giving you all of this data, I know you have it, and yet I still don't have a great experience. So you can see we've coded the responses to this McKinsey survey that was completed in November on the topics that consumers are saying, I really want to see from personalization. Meet me where I am, know what I want, offer something that works for me, and check in. Make sure that I'm okay with it. You can't see the images on this slide. We did practice a little bit earlier and we were having some issues, but they're emojis. And basically the consumer wants you to know them, guide them, and wow them. And the best way to do that in the offline world is a highly curated experience. So this company, my middle son is turning 18 years old today, and he's an avid fisherman, and I know zero things about fishing. So I began looking for a present to get him for his birthday, and I had no idea where to go or what to look for, because even the people that I know who do fish aren't quite the fishermen that my son is. So I stumbled upon this site, curated.com, and an individual person who is a fishing expert guided me through my purchase experience to select a fishing rod that, based on what I told them about my son and where we live and what kind of fish I think he normally catches, that he would find appealing for his birthday present. Luckily, he did. So thank you, Curated. But if you think about that at scale, that's really not something that brands are going to be able to deliver to millions and millions of consumers. And when we have the panel who's joining us later today and our customer UncommonGoods, these are not unique challenges. How do you create a highly personalized experience at scale, and use data to deliver that? Because we don't all have human beings to help us. So if we think about the stages of personalization, perfection is a customer focused level of personalization, individual, one-to-one. Again, at scale, that's super difficult. So we take an easier approach and we say, all right, let's do segments. We know a little bit about this person. We know kind of their age bracket, their gender, some of their purchase preferences. So let's do some segment-based personalization. And that's where you see a lot of the people who are at the forefront of this personalization evolution being focused, is on that segment-based level. And then we have some of the more recently modern ones, like model-based personalization. So I can do predictive audiences and lookalikes and those kinds of things. Rules-based. So when this action happens, let's trigger this follow-up action, which is another level of personalization. And then there's the no personalization, the ones where we're just sending a bunch of emails. We're running a ad targeting campaign, and we're okay with the less than 0.5% response because we need to get it out. So when we think about those stages of personalization, the reality is a lot of times we're stuck in personalization because the teams are siloed. They're segmented by channel instead of around the customer. And modern commerce teams, especially commerce teams who are doing a really, really great job at personalization, do not set KPIs based on channel. So we see this in our customers a lot of times. The customers who are doing an incredible job developing a personalization strategy that's across all the channels have customer-based KPIs. And we do have some materials in a video that can get into that in a little bit more detail. But in short, it looks a little bit like this. You have teams who are set up by channel, and they're KPI'd by channel, and there's revenue metrics by channel. But again, the guys that are doing it well and the gals that are doing it really well are the ones who set up their objectives and their KPIs with the customer at the center. And then the channels are touch points throughout that relationship. So, how do you really do this? And this is something that we work with a lot of our clients on. I'll give you a quick example at the end of this. The reality is the personalization flywheel does start with data. Everything always starts with data. We have a whole bunch of data. So, how do you actually connect and leverage that data in a meaningful way? You identify what it is that you're looking for, what you're looking to personalize. You start with a single channel or a single set of experiences. And you say, okay, I'm going to take this data set and I'm going to execute some level of personalization with this data set. So maybe it's past purchase preference or availability or a win back campaign or any of those things. One of the examples in the video that we use is someone who has a preference for vintage furniture. So you take that data element and you start to use that to execute a personalization campaign. And you don't want to do everything all at one time. So as you're executing with this very specific data set that you're using, you're getting insights on how much personalization is relevant. What is actually going to be beneficial to this customer? Where do they feel like their experience has been improved as a result of our use of this data set? And then you're testing, you're confirming it. We offer tools, but you guys already have a ton of tools, I'm sure, to run your A/B tests and ensure that the level of effort that you're putting in is working. And then you can roll it out and scale to all, as long as you understand at the foundational level that you have created access to that data, that segment data, and the way to personalize it across all channels. So that's when we talk about personalization, the flywheel that we work with our clients to deliver. Jensen is a great example of this. So Jensen is, as you can see, they're an outdoor. Well, they're a bike company, but they have a bunch of different types of offering for cyclists, and they wanted to personalize their search experience. So if you can imagine someone coming who's a mountain biker versus a road biker, and they type in bike tire, their search results theoretically should be very, very different. But that's hard to do because there's so much information and data that you need about a customer in order to really personalize that experience. We worked with Jensen to actually ingest those segments into their search bar itself. So their actual search functionality, where someone who's coming, who's either a mountain biker or a road biker, types in bike tire or helmet or gloves. And we were able to change the results of what appears in that search based on the category that those individuals belong to. And to take it a step further, we're even able at the individual level, if they search for bike tire or gloves or helmet, to know what they've purchased in the past and what likely is going to be the next best purchase for them and make those recommendations in search. So that's just a quick example from one of our customers on a very scoped effort of personalization that as part of the customer's experience. And with this test, they saw a 5% increase in annual revenue uplift and an increase of 8.5% RPV. So we were pretty excited, as was Jensen, with those results. And the reality is that personalization at the end of the day really relies on the right technology. You have to have the right pieces of the puzzle in place. And I know it's a little bit biased for me to be saying this because I work for a technology company that delivers personalization, but it's not just about putting a pop-up together or doing a personalized email with first name and like product recommendations in it. It really is about, again, putting the customer at the center of that personalization journey and delivering an end-to-end experience that, as we say, is so personalized it feels like magic. So that's the setup for our personalization discussion today. Hopefully you found that somewhat useful, and we can jump right into the Q&A with the rest of the team.
Great. Well, thank you, Amanda. You touched on a number of topics that we're going to be getting into in the panel around customer centricity and getting your data organized and organizational design. Most importantly, happy birthday to your son. I hope he's out having fun doing some fishing today, and you will be spoiling him appropriately later. We are going to do some polls and see what our audience is thinking about some of these topics. So real quickly, you can see the information on the polls again on the upper right. That's where you're either looking at the ones that are open where you're actively voting, or you go into close to see ones that have already been done. So why don't we go into our first question? What kind of e-commerce revenue lift do you think is possible from better personalization in the next year? Is it more than 15%, 10 to 15%, 5 to 10%, 0 to 5%, or you don't expect a revenue lift from personalization? It looks like the number one answer is 5 to 10%, followed by 10 to 15%. So a fair level of optimism about what personalization can do in the next year. That's some pretty impressive growth lift from personalization. So that's great. All right, let's close this one out. What do you believe can accelerate personalization the most? And you can select all that apply. So it's adding people to the team, better technology tools, organizing your data across channels, getting C-level buy-in, or moving the personalization function to a different department than where it is right now. So let's see what everyone has to say. About 43% is focused on organizing the data across channels, and a little more than a third are focused on better technology tools. So we have two more questions. Next question, we're going to close that one out. How far along are you in having a single view of the customer across all your touch points? Are you best in class? Are you strong, but you still more work to do? Are you getting started? Or is data still in silos and you don't really have a single view of the customer? So it looks like a lot of you are still getting started, almost a little bit more than half. And around 25, 26% are saying that your data is still in silos. So a lot of opportunity, which makes sense that if you can get that data out of the silos, going back to the first question about the potential lift. So it seems like there still is a lot of upside left. So I'm glad we're having this topic on our webinar today. All right, we have one more question, and it's a little bit of a preview of our next webinar on April 20th. As I showed a little preview of that, we're going to be talking about seamless e-commerce experiences across the customer journey, moderated by my co-founder, Veronica. But what have you done to remove friction from your e-commerce experience? And you can select all that apply. Have you optimized the e-commerce checkout flows? Have you personalized the e-commerce site experiences, which hopefully you'll have more insight to do from that today? Streamlined search and navigation, made your e-commerce experience omni-channel, enabled on-site customer service via chat, or other. And if it's something else, feel free to comment about that in the chat. All right, we have everyone's answers coming in. It seems to be concentrated around enabling on-site customer service via chat. I didn't expect that to rank as high as it did. So that seems like an interesting opportunity. The second highest is optimizing the e-commerce checkout flows. That's more of what I would have been expecting. And then streamlined search and navigation. So interesting, all the optimism around customer service via chat. So interesting to see that. All right, so thank you all for sharing a little bit. So as we go into the panel discussion, we have a little bit of more insight of where everyone is. So I'd like to bring the panel up and get started. So Elyse, Brian, Samir, thank you again for joining us. And why don't we get started with some introductions? So we'll start with you, Brian, if you can introduce yourself, your company, and your role.
Sure. I'm Brian Hashemi, Chief Marketing Officer at UncommonGoods. UncommonGoods is a retailer of unique products that you won't find anywhere else, which serves as a go-to gift destination for many of our customers.
And I recommend everyone check that out for Mother's Day. All right, Samir, Desai, welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. So Samir Desai, I'm the Chief Digital and Technology Officer at Abercrombie and Fitch. I joined about a year ago in this newly created role. And Abercrombie and Fitch has the namesake brand of Abercrombie and Fitch, but also owns and operates Hollister, Gilly Hicks, Abercrombie Kids, which we treat as a separate brand, and then Social Tourist, which is a brand we just recently launched last year. And prior to this, I spent about 14 or 15 years at Equinox running digital and technology there.
All right, and Elyse. Oh, Elyse, you're on mute.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Elise Burak. I head up consumer marketing at Capsule. Capsule is a tech-forward digital pharmacy that is really transforming the industry overall and how you engage with your pharmacy and how you get and manage your medication. And prior to that, I also was at Boxed, which is an e-commerce brand where there was quite a bit on the personalization front as well.
All right, we have a great diversity of business types. And so Samir, you have stores, obviously. And I want to start with you. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, what's personalization look like today at Abercrombie and some of the other brands? Anything you can describe about your personalization journey in terms of where it started, where it's now, where it's going, and then where is it in your physical presence with stores and sales associates?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so obviously personalization has been around for some time, and will continue to be around for a long time. But I'd say about 3 years ago or so, we kind of started our journey in earnest, and really, what that meant was the formation of bringing a number of different functions across the organization together in what we at the time called the Perso Pod or Squad. And it included people from our data and analytics team, our marketing team, creative teams, engineering teams. And so, we moved away from that siloed structure that Amanda talked about into that more customer-oriented and customer-centered model. So that was a big process change for us. We also invested in a lot of new technologies at the time. So, really started kind of looking at CDPs, DAM, CMS, a lot of the tools required to be able to activate the personalization experience on our services. And then, that really kind of allowed us to then enable what I'd call like an experimentation culture. And so where we were before was, there wasn't a lot of trust in the teams to be able to experiment rapidly. And so we evolved that and really enabled and empowered this Perso Pod to be able to run, a variety of different experiments concurrently over a period of time. And, we went through hundreds of experiments and realized a significant increase in our operating margin, which is one of the key metrics we were looking at, is just kind of what was the incremental op margin we were able to discover. And so now, where we're going forward is how do we take that experience that we've, I'd say, largely kind of perfected on our web, mobile, and email channels and tie it back into that omni-channel in-store experience. And so spending a lot of time with our associates in store, helping them build tools to be able to better clientele and better deliver a more personalized experience face-to-face, as well as thinking about what the role of the mobile app inside of a store. And so through things like geofencing, we're able to do, create unique experiences for our customer, knowing that they're in our four walls, and how does the mode of the app effectively, transition to a different state. So when they open up the app in our store, they're met with a different set of tools that allow them to kind of interact with, what it is that they're trying to do in the store in a more frictionless way. So those are some kind of things that are on the horizon for us as we think about that omni-channel experience.
Well, I love that idea of a Perso Squad that's really focused on this. So Elyse, why don't you tell us a little bit about, where Capsule is with personalization? What does it look like and where's it going? Oh, you're on mute again, Elyse.
Sorry about that. So it's very, very important at Capsule, and it was also at Boxed as well, to try to be as personal as we can to customers, especially given that this is people's health. and it's something that you're putting into your body or your kids' bodies. And so to just echo what Amanda was saying, it's much, much more than just putting a name into an email or a text message, which of course we do, but we view that completely as table stakes. And actually, as much as possible, we've really built a customer experience where wherever we can, we don't automate things. And when it comes to actually serving the customer's needs. So there's a huge amount of technology, but really trying to be able to be there for customers in real time, in a category like pharmacy. Part of the reason that people want to go into a physical pharmacy, and we've seen this through research, is they actually want to speak to a human being. And so like there's places where you want things to be automated. And of course, on the back end, you want everything to be automated, but it can go a long way to be talking to a real human being. So I'm actually not that surprised that the chat feature was one of the topics that rose to the top. I think the chat feature in and of itself is in a very much like nascency form. And Capsule doesn't actually even have that functionality. At Boxed we did. And I think like where I see personalization going as a whole is you're always going to come back to the same person. When it comes to like customer service, you're always going to be put back into that same person. So when you are shopping with any individual company and an issue comes up, you don't have to just like speak all of your information and somebody say, okay, yes, sure, let me just look up all of your information and figure out what the situation was. Like they will be able to know things right away. And I think really forward-thinking companies will be able to actually proactively see potential problems that will come about. And so it will reduce actually the number of inbounds of issues and complaints. Similar to what, Amanda's example was with the watch, right? Like there could be a world where like they actually predicted that there will be a decrease in price. And so instead of just removing her from a segment, could they go actually in the other direction and be really personal about like being transparent, letting her know that a sale is coming up, right? And they probably would buy in her trust, and then also could probably more easily upsell her in the moment, right? And so I think this like shift from proactive versus reactive is where things are going. What's complicated about that is in order to do that, you have to have a lot of information about the person. And how do you do that when cookies are going away? And how do you do that in a way that is also not incredibly creepy to the general consumer? So
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Thank you. And Brian, if you could like help us understand Uncommon Goods, where are you with personalization? Where do you see it going?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've been building up our personalization playbook for a number of years. Started doing the basic stuff, abandonment campaigns and out of the box recommendation algorithms. And those work to some degree. I think in the last year, we really started to build on something that Elise just said about where you get that data. In the last year, we really started to focus on collecting more first-party data from our customers, just explicitly asking them to share information about their shopping behavior with us. So, for instance, incenting them to set up recurring gift reminders with us, tagging products with a specific recipient that you're shopping for at the time. And then we've been having that information feed into our marketing so that you're receiving recommendations centered around the recipients that you've saved with us and the occasions that you've saved with us. I think our next step is to do more data mining so that rather than having to explicitly ask for this information, we can infer it from the customer behavior on the site. So, if you buy a grilling item on our site, did you buy it by going through our outdoor dining category or our gifts for husbands category? Like, those two things tell something very different about what you're doing. So, I think that kind of sounds like standard retargeting, but I think there's like a couple nuances that we're trying to perfect there. So for one thing, we're not categorizing according to just standard merchandising categories like a lot of other outside providers would do for us. We're trying to design a different kind of categorization taxonomy that is based on concepts that are really integral to our business. So, things like recipient, occasion, or like interest category, as opposed to merchandise category. And we're also, tagging customers with this information, so that, it can inform all of our future marketing, but having that customer entity really serve as the central hub that we're all tying all this data to is something that's new for us.
So Samir, I wanted to turn back to you, kind of like to start this question around, you described a pretty sophisticated, long-standing effort around personalization. I think you said you started around 3 years ago with that at Abercrombie. What would you describe as the hardest part of making progress? And there was also a specific question from the audience, wanted to know if you're using data across your different brands like Hollister and so on. And if you're able to share any mistakes you've made along the way that others can avoid making themselves, that would be great to hear too.
Yeah. So, I think I'd say nothing is easy, right? So I think one of the hardest parts for us was our business has been around for a long time. There's a lot of process that's been established and kind of longstanding. And so one of the bigger changes that we had to make was, shifting away from a largely kind of creative-led process and organization to a place where we created a more nimble design system that allowed the personalization teams to be able to operate within some sort of framework. And that itself was a pretty big evolution for us, in that, our creatives were really, out there in Photoshop or whatever tools that they're using, creating these kind of pixel perfect designs almost every time. And evolving away from that and kind of creating the structured templatized system was a big shift. But that ultimately drove a tremendous amount of speed and velocity for us from a delivery standpoint. And in hindsight, it was probably one of the best things we could have done. So I'd say that was a big learning. Another big learning was, just going through the effort of mapping out the customer journey. And we had, we're a big organization with a lot of different people and a lot of different functions touching the customer at different points. And so we didn't know what we didn't know. And we have one team orchestrating an experience, but at the same time, that customer is getting hit with other emails or push notifications or et cetera. And so, we were inundating, I'd say, the customer with a lot of information concurrently. So we really kind of stepped back and did a very kind of comprehensive end-to-end analysis around the journey by brand, by customer segment, and really kind of put that on multiple sheets of paper, frankly, and kind of aligned around what does that look like? And everybody kind of held hands and said, these are the points in which we want to communicate with the customer to not lose credibility. So that was a little bit of a kind of learning that we stumbled into after we got going. As far as the question around using data across brands, yes and no. I mean, I think the customer has a relationship with a specific brand, and the customer usually doesn't know that Abercrombie and Hollister are owned by the same kind of parent company, and we don't go out of our way to try to make that a known thing. But we do have access, obviously, to that anonymized data, and we can understand buying patterns. We can definitely understand what's working on one e-commerce experience and apply that to other e-commerce experiences. So there's a lot of synergy that we stand to gain from testing, an optimization in our checkout flow on Abercrombie.com. And if it works really well there, we can very quickly scale it to our other e-commerce platforms. So So there's synergies from kind of scale that from that perspective, as well as anonymized customer data and just understanding how macro events are affecting shopping behavior. But we're not targeting a specific Abercrombie customer because they showed up in a Hollister store. That line we preserve.
And Amanda, from the Bloomreach perspective, you're seeing implementation and personalization being applied, across a number of different business types and sizes of retailers and brands. I mean, what else could you share? In addition to what Samir was saying about, what are some of the hard things you need to be on the lookout for? What are some mistakes you can expect to happen? And if you can know them, then hopefully avoid them.
Yeah, and I think as Samir said, it's not easy. None of this is easy, and it is constant evolution. So I think some of the mistakes are not setting up those testing parameters at the beginning and making sure that you understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and ensuring that the data that you're capturing and gathering, that it's reportable and viewable, and that you can make quick decisions on it, and that your teams are aligned around what those KPIs are. But I think going back to more what Brian was saying, where he was talking about that exchange of information with the customer, and really cooperating with them to participate in giving information. The customers that we've seen be our customers that we've seen be very successful, we call it zero party data, because the belief there is that you think about your Netflix experience, by ranking movies that you're going to get recommendations that are more relevant to you. My Netflix recommendations have gotten a little bit worse, maybe because I've gone through all of the ones they've recommended, but the reality is that the consumer is willing to give you information if they know that exchange of information is going to make their experience better. So one of our customers, for example, Baby Waltz, they have baby clothing and those kinds of things, and they ask their customers, what's your due date, what's the gender of your child, so that we can give you recommendations along the journey of your pregnancy and when you're post the birth of your child, and make sure that the products that we're recommending are relevant. And they killed it. I mean, that campaign has done incredibly well for them. And the consumer, that's a piece of information that's usually held pretty close to the vest when you're talking about your kids. So the fact that this brand really responsibly worked with consumers to help them not only provide the data, but also let them know how useful that information was going to be in their online engagements with this company, have done incredibly well for them. So it's much more about just transparent use of that data and working with your consumers to understand what they're willing to provide you.
Samir, there was one quick question specific to you. You mentioned templatized creative, and Leslie Leifer from 100 Flowers wanted to know what you meant by that.
Yeah, and it's really, creating the right design system. So, when we're thinking about our kind of the structure of our email content, what are the experience fragments that effectively we've predefined, and then our creative teams and experience teams can go in and work within those constructs. So it's not a blank slate, but they've got a header, they've got a body, they've got set of typography, color palettes, et cetera, that we've pre-aligned on, and so they're working within that template, whether it be an email or a PDP page or just kind of our browse experience. So we've done the heavy lifting kind of upfront, aligning on what that needs to look like structurally, and then they can kind of go into those kind of fragments and then have a little bit of freedom within those spaces.
Great, thanks. So we asked that audience question about what do you think is required to accelerate personalization, and getting your data organized was number one, and better technology was number two. So fortunately, those were questions we wanted to talk about, and our panelists were all thinking about in advance. But why don't we start with getting the data organized? And Elyse, it was interesting to hear you talk about how you're not as much focused on automation, but certainly if you have any touch point, whether it's chat or phone or whatever, you need the person behind that to have access to all the data, to essentially have that single view of the customer. So, I'm interested to hear, what that's been like for you to get all that data organized and have that single view of the customer.
Yeah. And to clarify, it's not that automation is not important to Capsule. It is very important in ways where it can, drive efficiency. But what I mean is that automation almost like at its core, like conflicts with personalization. Um, and so when a large part of, for those who have used the Capsule service, a large part of the service does not even have to be in the app. It can be literally through text. And how many times have you had like just an automated text message saying like your prescription is ready to be picked up, right? And like you've gotten that when I've gotten that when I've already picked it up, and like so I think like that's the point first and foremost, is that like when you can easily and efficiently have moments that you can speak directly person to person, then you should do so, because it goes, I think, a long way now. And as we continue to just become like more technologically advanced, where people want to have like real human connection and interaction with the brands that they're engaging with. In terms of like getting things organized, very similarly to what Brian and Samir have said, at both Capsule and at Boxed, where things have worked best in terms of creating organization is when there's been cross-departmental pods, and being able to map out the journey from multiple perspectives, because the person that has the view of the customer journey from an engineering perspective has a very different view of what the customer journey is from somebody from a marketing standpoint. And so like when and where to interact with them and what's the right moment. It's hard to get organized if you like are not even all speaking the same language of like what is the person experiencing. And so that has been something that has taken a lot of time. And I would love if there was some kind of tool out there that somebody either on the panel or in the audience, would recommend. I think a lot of the customer journey mapping that I've done throughout my career has been very much manual, like literally also even in Google Sheets, kind of mapping out like this is what they get when they're first coming onto onboarding. Like this is every single screen that they are seeing as they go through onboarding, flow charts here versus there. I think probably the best tool that I have seen is Figma, to be able to like provide those journeys. But even still, like there's only so much there that you could really like play with to kind of think about how would we want to change this? Like, where would we want to interject something else, et cetera? It's much more, of a design tool. So that's where I think like having cross-departmental pods and like really mapping things out and getting on like the same wavelength of like, what are we even talking about and where are we trying to reach people? And then from there, you can be just that much more organized of how you want to segment people and when and where.
Yeah, Brian, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, one thing that I want to stress is the importance of data design. Like, personalization is only going to be as good as the data, right? So not everyone understands that designing data is something you have to proactively do. Like, it's an act of creativity to like think through like what is important for your customers, like how do they shop your site, and like what's the intersection of that with the design, the data that is available to you that you can get through how people are browsing through your site. And it's kind of a fun exercise to like think through like really like what data structure will reflect what your customers are actually doing on the site.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting the example you provided, Brian, about like a specific product someone bought, and did they come through the Father's Day gift ideas, or they come through gifts for, whatever, a certain amount, certain dollar amount or something. And it tells you something about that, circumstances of someone buying. There's a lot to learn there.
Yeah, I mean, you asked earlier about the mistakes that we've made, and one of them that we've made is, trying to use just kind of a standardized approach, that's kind of these out of the box things. So, if you come to our site and you buy a piece of bike art for your mom for her birthday, out of those four things, like biking, art, mother, and birthday, probably the least predictive is art. It's not like you're really into art. You're buying something for your mom, you're buying birthday gift, but we were personalizing on art because that's just, kind of like the standard in retail is you use merchandise categories. And it took us a while to like realize, oh wait, like that's not actually the thing that the customer is doing. So just taking a little more nuanced view and a little more sophisticated view of your data, I think has been really helpful.
Yeah. So the other part of that question to the audience about accelerating personalization was around the technology. Samir, I'm interested to hear how you think about technology. Anything you can share about some of the core pieces in your stack, and then how do you think about where there's gaps in your technology? How do you fill those in? Obviously, there's an infinite number of potential solutions out there. Many of them overlap in capabilities, and so yeah, any kind of broad approaches that you could share of how you look at technology, I think would be useful for everyone.
Yeah, so I'd say there's a kind of couple of layers, right? So on the kind of topmost layer, we looked at our marketing technology and really kind of spent a lot of time modernizing that layer. And so we went out to market, did an RFP for a customer data platform, and we ended up selecting a company called Evergage, which is now a Salesforce company. And so we implemented that as our CDP and really kind of became our kind of central hub, so to say, of customer data. And then we've made a lot of investments in the Adobe stack with their tools around DAM, CMS, analytics, target, et cetera. And so those tools have helped us orchestrate a lot of the experience. But as the comment was already made, these tools are only as good as the data that they're working with. And so we are on a journey to modernize a lot of our data infrastructure. And we've selected Snowflake and Databricks from an ML kind of platform perspective. But Snowflake, I think, is going to be, the reason we went in that direction is so much of the time is spent in integrating data, ingesting, cleaning. We're spending probably 80+% of our effort figuring out how to get the data into the right place, clean, and then it becomes, finally usable. And so with cloud-based data platforms like Snowflake, we're able to, increase the speed of which we can integrate with third-party data sets because that platform allows for that. So that's a big area of focus for us. And then just kind of going back to kind of the previous conversation around single view of the customer. With all this, a lot of great technologies that can solve a lot of different problems, but ultimately getting clear on what problems we're trying to solve upfront is really important. And because otherwise we end up with all these fancy, shiny tools that can do a lot of things, but ultimately we haven't done the heavy work of defining like this is the specific experience or the specific customer pain points that we're trying to solve. And how do we leverage these tools to solve that pain point? Oftentimes it ends up being the other way where the tool can do this and that and the other thing. And now, how do we leverage this cool feature that, this tool has, even if that's not a real pain point that we're trying to solve for? So really kind of pushing our collective teams to think about what's the journey that we're trying to deliver, and then think about how the tools can support that versus the other way around.
Where do you find some of the best ideas for customer pain points that need to be solved? Is it store associates? Is it, telephone reps, warehouse workers?
Yeah, look, honestly, there's a lot of quantitative data that you can kind of glean from observation. But for us, voice of customer, the qualitative data is where the richest insights have been. And so, whether it be surveying, talking to our associates, even things like NPS and CSAT are really strong indicators of how strong of a personalization experience you're delivering, because you're going to see that reflected in your Net Promoter scores. And if the customer is not happy with that experience, then you're also going to hear it in the NPS. So a lot of that qualitative data has been really insightful for us.
All right. I want to ask Brian maybe one last question, and then we're going to have all of you tell us what kind of great job openings you all have in your organizations and give a plug for that. But Brian, on the tech stack question for you, like, I'd be interested to hear how you approach it. I mean, not an omni-channel retailer like Abercrombie and Fitch, not quite the same size as them. So, interested to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we have a homegrown platform which allows us the flexibility to build a lot of custom features and data sets that suit our customers. The downside is that it often slows us down. But yeah, I mean, I agree with what Samir was saying, that like the bulk of your effort is figuring out how to capture and store this data, and then you have capable partners that you can easily plug that into. So we kind of build the data sets ourselves, and then we feed them out to we use ListTrack for email and Bloomreach for on-site search and merchandising. I think the vendors out there are pretty good at ingesting data and using it once you design it.
All right. Well, let's see. I'm trying to get to some of the questions that came in. We have 3 minutes left. Actually, 2 minutes. So why don't we? I apologize and get to all of the questions to our audience, but I am so grateful for you as a panel for spending some time and sharing all of these insights. I want to give back a little bit. So we'll start with Elyse. Are you hiring? Anything you want to point out, and where can people find out more?
Yes, we are definitely hiring, and Capsule is expanding across the country in various cities. So pretty much any job opening that you could think of, all the way down to couriers, we are hiring for. I would say probably what would be most helpful from this group is any inbounds of really amazing product managers, product folks, engineers, which I'm sure is what everybody else is going to say. But that's really what I think is the most needed. But there's so many opportunities at Capsule.
And Samir?
Yeah, no, she hit it right on the nail. So digital product design engineers, data and analytics. We're expanding our MarTech stack. So folks who've got kind of specialties in marketing technology, a lot of growth in our digital and technology team. So, Abercrombie.com careers page.
Oh, wait, Elyse, where can people go? Did you say that?
Yeah, the careers page on the Capsule website or on, LinkedIn. It will be posted there as well.
All right, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in personalization, we're hiring a product manager to manage our browsing user experience. So that is like the job that runs our personalization. So go to our website, careers page.
All right. And finally, Amanda, I wanted to ask you the same question, and thank you again for Bloomreach sponsorship of this topic and this conversation. And any final thoughts you wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you. And absolutely great panel. Love the insight. Glad we're at least all aligned. And we also are hiring like crazy. We hire a ton of subject matter experts as well to help consult and work with clients that we bring on board with retail experience. So bloomreach.com careers. And thank you all for your time.
All right. Well, thank you all again, Elyse, Amanda, Brian, Samir. Stay tuned. We'll be back on April 20th for our webinar on seamless customer experiences. And remember to spend some time checking out our summit on June 21st and 22nd in New York. We hope to see you there. Have a good rest of your day and week, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you all again so much.